Hi, I'd like to share some words of Torah with you, not really about this week's Parsha per se, but more about this Shabbat. This Shabbat is called Shabbat haGadol, the Great Shabbat. Now, I want to mention two specific ideas. We will do each one very briefly. The first is about action, taking action. And the second is about Shabbat itself and the greatness of Shabbat. Okay, let's begin. Shabbat is great, right? Why is this Shabbat so great? Why is it called Shabbat haGadol? The answer is, well, it's because of the great miracle that took place. What was that great miracle? Just to quickly review, in case we've forgotten or we're not so familiar. The great miracle was that the Jewish people took the sheep and tied it to their bedposts for 4 days. Why 4 days? Well, they wanted to make sure the animals were healthy before offering it up to God as a paschal offering. When did they do this? When did they initially take the sheep? On the 10th of Nisan. In the year of the Exodus, the 10th of Nisan was on Shabbat. This was the great miracle, and this, say the halachic sources, is why this Shabbat is called Shabbat haGadol. Question number one. Great miracle. What's the big deal? So the Egyptians didn't bother us. Okay, we're slaughtering their God, and they left us alone. It is a miracle. When you think of the splitting of the sea, wouldn't that be much more significant? Aren't there many more miracles, particularly throughout this Exodus process? Why is this miracle so significant that we call this Shabbat haGadol, the Shabbat of the great miracle? That's question number one. And the answer that's offered for this particular question is consider. Most of the miracles had a top-down sort of effect, where God says, I want to introduce myself as creator, I'm going to manipulate creation, check this out. But on the other hand, this miracle is very different. God says, I want you to take your knowledge of me and put it into action. Take your faith on the one hand, take your trust on the other hand, solidify it, and just follow my commandment. Take those sheep and tie them to your bedposts. I guarantee you nothing will happen. It took a tremendous amount of guts, a tremendous amount of faith and belief in God to enable us to do this. And the fact that God responded is miraculous indeed, and therefore it's a great miracle. Why? Because we acted, and therefore it's greater than the others in a certain sense. But the real question is, Shabbat haGadol. Shabbat haGadol? The great Shabbat? Every Shabbat is great. In fact, we say, Ki yom zeh gadol v'kadoshu. This day is great and it's holy. So what's so great about this particular Shabbat? The answer that's given is that when you consider the nature of Shabbat, and you consider the nature of the Exodus, Shabbat, we say, is Zecher v'Maaseh Bereshit. It's in order to recall creation. The Exodus is God exhibiting His mastery over creation, manipulating creation. In a sense, it's teaching us that God runs the world. So on the one hand, God creates the world, He's the producer, but on the other hand, He's also the director. He manipulates. He has input. And He continues to be aware of what's happening in the world. So yes, every Shabbat is great. But the Shabbat of the Exodus is even greater, in the sense that it tells us, it teaches us that God is great. Not just Shabbat is great, God is great. Why? Because what was the Egyptian philosophy? God doesn't exist, or if He does exist, He can't control us. God says, hold on a second, I'm going to teach you a lesson. Jewish people, take that sheep, tie it to your bedpost. And when are you going to do it? Specifically on Shabbat. Why? Because I want to teach the Egyptians, as well as teach you, that I am the creator. The first action we learned was about action. Taking action. Listening to God, stepping up to the plate, and doing what we need to do. And God will help us out. The second idea we learned is, the Shabbat is great, and God is great. I want to wish you a very great holiday. I look forward to seeing you after Pesach.